Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again. Burgundy Fly Guy here, coming at you with a video. Taking me a little bit to come out with this video. This is a touchy subject. This is going to be that video that I've been promising you guys, the video where we discuss the issues with Kirk Cousins. I was one of the few vid makers who had come out that had I was a little wishy-washy on my reportings of my opinions of Kirk Cousins because I stand on two different sides here. One of those sides I think is a fairly popular vote and comment to make, and the other one I believe is a rather controversial one. Now, I have said at the beginning of the season, I've said it even before, that I felt that Kirk Cousins had the ability to play at a high level for this football franchise. However, I've also come around and have said that I would not necessarily sign him to a long-term deal. Now, there are reasons as to why I have said these things. There are reasons as to why I feel the way that I do, but a lot of this has to do with the way that we are in our current situation right now as a football franchise in regards to this quarterback. This is not a video where I get to post my opinion about how good or not good Kirk Cousins is, as to whether I think he's going to take us to the promised land or not. I am talking about, and I'm basing my opinion on the current state of affairs with the Washington Redskins, the current state of affairs with Kirk Cousins as a quarterback, because those are very, very volatile situations there. They're not exactly as cut and dried as it seems. And honestly, even with this short length video here that I have, and it's probably not going to be short, but even it does not matter how far I go into this, there's still always a lot more at play. It's always a little bit more complicated. And these issues that I bring up now are going to be the issues that I feel are the most glaring when it comes to deciding whether Kirk Cousins is going to be a long-term solution for this football franchise or not. Having said that, there's a couple issues that I definitely want to hit, a couple bullet points that I want to air out there, reinforcing the opinions that I have in regards to Kirk Cousins as to whether we should keep him here or as to whether we should let him go. Now, having said that, there's a lot of other vid makers that have been out there that have talked about keeping him on the football franchise by paying him his money. I do believe, in fact, I think a lot of the vid makers that I follow, a lot of the vid makers that I watch, it's almost we've gotten into slogan time, you know, where we come out with our slogan, pay the man his money, pay the man his money. And I came out with a video after that where I was able to kind of iterate my opinions on whether I felt that was a good idea or not. Basically, I kind of felt that was a bad idea to pay this man his money and to get behind the sloganing of signing Kirk Cousins and keeping him here. To me, it was a lot more complicated than that. To me, there was a lot more behind the scenes. There was a lot more things to take into consideration as opposed to just watching a football game, watching him complete a third down conversion, and then saying, let's pay this man his money. It's way more complicated than that. And I aired that out. I aired those feelings out on this last video. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back into my archives and take a look from a couple weeks ago where I discussed the Kirk Cousins debacle just a little bit from my perspective. So I'm not going to go into that very much. I've got bullet points and things that I want to talk about that don't necessarily hit on that subject per se. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here with that opinion. Go back and watch that video if you don't know what I'm talking about. If you do, we can progress forward. Now, one of the issues with Kirk Cousins, obviously Kirk Cousins is looking at a very, very interesting offseason here. He's got several options that are going to be available to people that are going to decide his fate. It's not going to be up to him, as it's rarely up to a quarterback who gets drafted into this league and wants to sign a long-term deal, especially with the situation that we've put him in. He doesn't necessarily know where he's going to go. All I know is that this kid's got a threshold, and I think to a certain extent he's aired out that threshold, whether he's not exactly come out and said it, but he's hinted towards it. And I think just about everybody who's reporting on this issue in Washington has kind of brought that up, that the kid's got patience, he has a threshold, and with some of the statements that he's made, I don't think he minds playing here in Washington, but he's going to make us pay if that's going to happen. Now, one of the things that affected my decision on whether we keep Kirk Cousins or not, one of the facets, one of the sides of this Rubik's Cube that I consider to be the whole situation of Kirk Cousins and his situation here in Washington, one of those sides, the Rubik's Cube I had mentioned in my previous video, had to do with the defense. I wanted a much, much higher caliber defense, something that you can't necessarily acquire in the offseason of 1 year, something that you cannot necessarily acquire with the draft picks that we have. Let's face it, guys, we're not reserving all these draft picks for defense. That's not going to happen. I don't know of too many teams that go out there and take every single one of their draft picks going into the offseason and dedicates them completely to one side of the football. There's many sides of the football here that we got to take into consideration, whether it be special teams, offense, or what have you, depth. But it does go a little bit into the heart of what it is that I wanted to address. Kind of going back a little bit here off of the Kirk Cousins subject that I think is at the foundation of my decision, the foundation of what some of the issues are here in Washington that could very, very drastically affect our decision in keeping Kirk, and if we do keep Kirk, could affect the football franchise's success in the future or the lack thereof. I believe, and I've always believed, that by narrowing down two of the major things about this football franchise, and I'm coming up with ideas here as I'm talking, but I'm going to issue this in my notes later on. But a couple of the issues that I have definitely seen the last, 20 years has been basically kind of condensed into two major things. And those two major things, one of them I'm going to hit on predominantly here. One of those two situations has been drafting viable talent beyond one or two players each and every single year. With all of the draft picks that we have available to us going into the draft, what I mean by viable talent, I mean by talent that you're able to sign beyond a 3 or 5 year rookie deal. That is, to me, drafting with success. Drafting somebody out of the draft, being able to cultivate that talent, and being able to sign that talent to an extended deal, that is the mark of a successful franchise in regards to that particular player. We don't hit and miss very well. We miss more often than we hit, just like a lot of other struggling teams do out there. But you take a look at a lot of the successful teams. A lot of these successful teams often hit more often than they miss. And I'm not talking about guys that go out and produce Pro Bowl caliber players or Super Bowl caliber players, but players that are starters that can sustain the meat and potatoes of their team. You know, they may not be flashy, individuals that make Pro Bowls every year, but it seems like they're on the team every year. You know, they're the foundation of that football franchise. We have not had a foundation on this team for quite some time that has been talent that we've cultivated out of the draft. That's been one of our major glaring weaknesses and an argument of mine about being a Redskins fan for years and years and years is our inability to draft football players, viable football players, and actually cultivate them within our own. And of course, that cultivation word is going to segue right on into the second issue that I have. If the first one's been drafting talent, the second one has been player development. Player development is not a benchmark in Washington, and we will never be a Super Bowl caliber team unless if that changes. Those two things have to change if you want sustained success in this league. One of those things can get you to a Super Bowl. If you can cultivate talent on your roster, you can get to a Super Bowl. Now, everybody knows talent comes and goes. Coaches come and go. It's the people above that. It's the people at the GM level, the people at the president level, the people at the owners level, the coaches level. Those are the individuals that are able to bear the brunt of the responsibility for the cultivation of that talent. We do not cultivate talent on this football team. We've got several football players on this football team that have regressed. Kirk Cousins is one of the few talents, along with maybe a Jordan Reed. I dare say Pierre Garçon, but we didn't draft and cultivate Pierre Garçon. He was already drafted and cultivated when he came here. There's a lot of individuals on this football team that you can say that about. Ryan Kerrigan is an individual that I would consider a viable talent, somebody who we drafted and cultivated. And right behind him right now appears to be Trent Murphy. Trent Murphy had a really, really good season this year. He played a lot better than he did last year. And if he continues down that road, he could be another individual on this football franchise that we could benefit from for several years to come if we're able to cultivate that caliber talent. That is what I'm talking about. That goes into a major part of the success of this football franchise is being able to cultivate that talent around the quarterback. Being able to bring that talent in, even if it's a free agent, whether it's a draft, being able to cultivate them. How many guys can you pick on both hands that we have drafted that we haven't cultivated for crap? Right now, the individual that scares me, ladies and gentlemen, is Bashaud Breeland. Bashaud Breeland came out his rookie season and just lit it up, and we all saw just wonderful, wonderful things for this young man coming down the road as far as being able to return the dividends for this football franchise as one of the marquee corners in this league. Last year, he looks like one of those individuals that you can't wait to get rid of. He regressed so much in his sophomore season. We really have to see him progress in year 3 and year 4 to really be able to say if this kid's going to be viable to stay here or not. Because to tell you the truth, guys, I have no faith in him staying on this football franchise. I have no faith that he's going to be able to be cultivated into a good player because there is no history of that on this football team. You cannot take a look at this football player and say that by his talent alone, that's what's going to keep him on this football franchise. Because how many individuals have we had on this football team that have played like garbage and have gone somewhere else and played better? That's not necessarily talent. You're unlocking the talent by coaching. You're unlocking the talent by development. You're unlocking the talent by making that player believe, and whatever it is you're doing off the field is showing you on the field the fruits of those labors. We do not do that in Washington. It does not matter the Kirk Cousins that come along. It does not matter the Robert Griffin IIIs that come along. It does not matter whoever it is that you bring in here. Okay, it doesn't matter. You could pick any laundry list of quarterbacks we've had in the last 20 years. Unless you got the players around him to sustain the success, you're going to be hit and miss every single year. These things have come to my mind in regards to why I would or would not want to sign and keep a Kirk Cousins here. If you're a football franchise that cannot cultivate your own talent, you're going to pay through the nose for a high-caliber quarterback. There's a lot of them that do. The league is rife with this history. If your quarterback doesn't have much faith in your team getting back and forth to the playoffs, then hey, if I'm going to go out there and take my lumps, you're going to pay me. You are going to pay me my money, or I'm going to go somewhere else and make just as much, if not more. Tom Brady is a guy who gets thrown around a lot in regards to that thought process, and part of the reason why he gets thrown around is because he has the knowledge, he has the ability to prove that he can sign franchise-friendly contracts with this football team, because he has the faith that they're going to take him to that successful promised land. Washington is not one of those teams. Washington is not a place that you come to want to gain sustained success and go to the playoffs on a consistent basis. Now, how do we start that? Do we start that by signing Kirk and giving him his money so that we can get to the playoffs more often? That could possibly be a solution. But where you guys are looking at the possibility of Kirk Cousins being a great football player and taking us to the promised land as a quarterback, I'm also taking a look at the reality of the cap. The cap has to do with the majority of my decision as to not keeping Kirk Cousins. Okay, let's go into that a little bit later. But as far as the player development situation goes, we've got issues on defense that need to be addressed. We do not cultivate players on this football team. We do not cultivate corners. We do not cultivate safeties. We do not cultivate linebackers. With the exception of Ryan Kerrigan and Trent Murphy, those are the only two exceptions that I can think of since LeVar Arrington that we are able to cultivate. And you can't say London Fletcher. London Fletcher was not groomed and cultivated here. He was brought here after having already proved that. We paid pretty penny for a guy that was a little bit over the hill, but ended up being one of the better linebackers that we've seen in 3 or 4 years. So I'm not counting London Fletcher. And I'm talking inside linebacker as much as I'm talking outside linebacker, which is two areas that I think we need a lot of help in. Also, defensive lineman is not necessarily another position. Those are basically all the positions on defense, guys. We got Chris Baker that we're cultivating on defensive line, and he's a wonderful story. But Chris Baker is honestly an average defensive lineman on most playoff caliber teams. He's a good baseline, but we want better. We want to be able to go to the draft, something that I felt like a lot of you guys did, something that I felt that we should have done last year. We should have submitted our bid for a defensive lineman last year to bring in here to cultivate next to a guy like Chris Baker. He would have already had a year behind him. And I'm not talking about going out and picking up a high-price caliber talent, not like an Ndamukong Suh. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the draft, drafting somebody. This would have been the perfect time. Right before Chris Baker If you think about it, in my opinion, some of these players play the best the year before or 2 years before their contracts are up. These are when these guys are coming out trying to prove, hey, I'm worth the money. What a perfect time to bring a defensive lineman in, to cultivate under that auspices. If you've got a guy who's really trying to bust his ass, you got another guy right next to him that's going to want to play to his level. Okay, I don't know if I necessarily want to sign a defensive lineman after we've already signed a Chris Baker. Chris Baker's a great player, but a lot of these guys, man, once you sign them to their big contracts, a lot of them just sit back and earn their money and just make business decisions so that they can stay in the league just a little bit longer. I don't know if I'd want to bring in a defensive lineman under that idea, unless if it was a first-round draft selection, a first-round stud who happens to fall into our lap. All that's for a later video. Now, the cultivation of the football players anywhere on defense, that is an issue. It does not matter to me. You guys concentrate a lot on the draft, and I'm concentrating a little bit on the draft, but I don't watch college football talent that much anymore. I really don't. I don't see the need for it. I really don't. And the reason why I don't is, especially this year, why would I concentrate on it this year? We don't even have a defensive coaching staff right now. Our coaching staff is so decimated, I don't even know who's going to be in there. I could tell you one thing. One of the biggest issues is we concentrate a little bit too much on defensive coordinator as far as cultivation goes. That is not, if you're taking a look at the defensive coordinator, you're taking a look at the guy who sits at the very top of the food chain. If you guys have jobs out there and you're working for a corporation, how many times can you sit there and say that the owner of the company is the reason why your job sucks? It's not necessarily, the situation that your job sucks because of the guy that you don't see, the guy that you only see in a framed picture around your business. It's usually the guy that sits right above you, the supervisor that's coming down on you. That's usually where it's at. That's usually what makes your life a living hell, is that ladder stepper that's got to bow to the dude that's on the framed picture. What I'm talking about in regards to cultivation, it is the guys that sit at the strength and conditioning level. It's the guys that are sitting at the position coaching level. Those are the guys that cultivate the talent. My experience in college football, I can tell you on one hand how many times I had one-on-one interaction with my defensive coordinator playing on a college football team. Very rarely did I come in contact with the head of our defense, the defensive coordinator. He would give us pep talks, he would give us speeches, we'd travel on the bus together, scrimmages, we would take our cue from him. But I could tell you, the guy that was pretty much in your face every single day, every single play, didn't matter what time of day it was, no matter which practice it was, even in the weight room, the guy that's in your face all the time, that you interact with every single step of the way, is the position coach. The position coach is the one that knows you the best. He's the one that sees you every single day. He knows when you're trying hard. He knows when you're not trying hard. He knows when it's a mental thing or a physical thing. He's the one that reports to the defensive coordinator, and then the defensive coordinator makes his decisions. But it's largely based on the opinion of the position coach. We do not have great position coaches, and we haven't had great position coaches. We've had position coaches that have gone up and moved to defensive coordinator positions on other teams. That's fine, but it does us no good. I want to see cultivation. If I want to be able to take a look at being in a position to sign a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, or a quarterback that can get us to the playoffs, I want to know that we can cultivate players around it, because I want to go there a lot. I want sustained success. I want to be able to go to the playoffs 2 years in a row and beyond that. And really one of the only ways that I know how to get there a lot is by cultivating the talent that we have. Now, one of the things that we can definitely say that's positive about him, honestly, we developed Kirk we've developed Kirk into being, the player that he is today. Before coming into this league after getting selected in 2012, he's turned into a phenomenal quarterback, and we can say that we've definitely done that. We've definitely cultivated him. In fact, I don't necessarily know if there are too many players in this football team that we've cultivated to this level in a very, very long, long time. I mean, honestly, it's a mark of our success, despite some of the setbacks that we've had as a football franchise in the time that he's been here. He's come along quite nicely. It's been really nice to kind of see his progression from my particular standpoint. And I understand the need to keep him here in DC because of that development. Some of those reasons, honestly, it's what the good teams do. Good teams go out there and they cultivate the talent that they have, and then of course they sign them to the deals that they need to sign them to, because they want the dividends of that cultivation to pay off down the road. They want to be able to have that talent stay in-house. That development honestly pay dividends down the road as far as the team is concerned. And the teams that don't do that are the teams that are always in the bottom, the teams that don't necessarily make the playoffs on a consistent basis. We don't want to be one of those football franchises. He's destroyed franchise records. He's destroyed franchise records, and he's well on pace to be getting more. I'll go on to his stats here in a little bit because I've got those down here as well. Those are some of the needs as far as keeping him here in DC. There's plenty of others too, but those are some of the main glaring ones that we have, because mainly it's what the good teams do as far as their developed players go. Being able to have those dividends pay for you down the road once you've got him into that long-term deal, being able to reap those rewards, and also the fact that he's, with the mark that he's been on statistically, it would make all the sense in the world to keep him here. He could and does have the ability to take us to the next level. Now, these are some of my arguments as far as I have seen as for us having to get rid of him. Kirk has little over, honestly, and this is the one thing that really baffles me. I don't understand it, but it is one of those truisms that exists in the football franchise if you are a Washington Redskins fan, and I don't understand it. All I know is that it's there. But one of the major glaring facts is the fact that this guy really quite literally has only about half of the fan support for staying a Washington Redskin. You know, the rest of them honestly are searching. The rest of the fans, support that's not there. These guys are searching far and wide, and they're scouring stat sheets, and they're brushing up, and they're looking for excuses to be able to bring out their Tony Romo comparisons, just for reasons to hate the guy. And I've never really quite seen anything like it for somebody who's had the success that Kirk has had in Washington. He really, quite literally, in my opinion, only has about maybe 50% of the fan support. The rest of them want him gone. They want to see him go. And they cannot wait for the moment when they are proved correct that he should have been gone a long time ago. And that really kind of makes you wonder about where your allegiance lies as far as being a Redskins fan to begin with, because if somebody comes in here and plays well, I've never really quite seen on too many occasions where we've had such a huge support to have them gone, to have them out of here, to take that ability and have it go perform for somebody else. It does not make sense to me, but it definitely exists here. Kirk Cousins, and for those reasons, I don't necessarily think that Kirk Cousins fits the typical quarterback mold that a DC fan craves for. He doesn't have a whole lot of charisma. He doesn't have that TV personality, TV announcer type personality. He doesn't have swagger. He doesn't have a hyperactive social media presence. He doesn't have that killer instinct. He doesn't have the character attributes to be loved and beloved like other quarterbacks in Washington's past, with the exception of maybe a Mark Rippon. And to tell you the truth, for those of you that go back that far, there really wasn't a whole lot of love for Mark Rippon before he started taking us to playoff games. There was a lot of people that wanted to see him gone and thought the old crackpot, Joe Gibbs, was crazy for taking Mark Rippon as their banner waver behind center. And we don't talk about that anymore because the man won us a Super Bowl. Now he's regaled as one of the top 3 best quarterbacks this franchise had seen in the 1980s to this point, because he won us a Super Bowl. Very few of us remember what Mark Rippon's reputation was like prior to that. And honestly, there's a good segment of this fan base that will never forgive Kirk Cousins for Robert Griffin III leaving DC. It's something that's glaring. It's something that's hard to say, but everybody knows it, especially the media. The media knows it. That's why the media, I think, does a lot of the things that they do as far as the reporting of Robert Griffin III. They still get a lot of really good clicks on that because, honestly, guys, a big majority of his fans in the NFL are Redskin fans. And hated to see him go. I was a huge Robert Griffin supporter, but I have to admit, when he left for Cleveland, I was about done with him. I at that point, I pretty much saw the bolts and the glue coming apart on the ship in the middle of the ocean, and I said, you know what, before he sends us all under, he's got to go. He's going to have to go somewhere else. And man, I was a huge Robert Griffin III banner waver when he got here, and I was one of those people that was extremely disgruntled by his performance up until this point, and I've had to let him go, man. I've had to move on to Kirk Cousins, and I've been a Kirk Cousins supporter ever since. I don't necessarily pay that much attention to Robert Griffin III anymore, for obvious reasons. He plays for the Browns, and I think the writing's on the wall for him, so I don't really care. Another reason as to why I think Kirk should probably go is he's not Gruden's guy, and I've said this before. Gruden was stuck with him. Gruden was stuck with him after he had to make the executive decision, the very, very difficult, probably career-changing decision to let go of Washington's favorite son. and ended up having to go with the backup at that point was Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is my guy. He's the only one that can execute my offense, so I'm going to have to stick with the kid from Michigan State. And that was not a happy decision, but we've done pretty well with the kid behind center. We've been able to move that football up and down the football field on offense since Kirk has taken the helm and since Gruden has been able to impose his knowledge of the quarterback position onto this young man. And for all I know, Scott McGloin feels the same way. All I know is that the franchise, honestly, the franchise believes that they can find an equally good quarterback out there, somewhere out there, whether it's free agency or the draft, somebody who has equal talent that we can pay at less the cost. We wouldn't be doing the things that we're doing if we didn't feel that way. I think everything that we've done as a football franchise is indicated as such. There's even been reports from the media that that's exactly how we feel, that we don't feel that he's worth the money that he's asking, that we can get a sizable talent from somebody else out there that we can cultivate for a much lesser cost. Obviously, I am for that. If we can find that and do that, let's do it. Let's get rid of Kirk and get somebody who's just as good as Kirk. I don't know who that's going to be. I really have no clue. Is that person in the 2017 draft? I don't know. Is he? Nobody saw Kirk Cousins coming out of Michigan State doing what he did here. Nobody did. Not one of us. I knew Kirk Cousins coming out of Michigan State because that 2012 season, I paid a hell of a lot of attention to quarterbacks because I wanted a quarterback here. I had a laundry list, and I've got videos going back in my archives. Go back and check those out. I could tell you Kirk Cousins was on that list. He was definitely on that list. He was probably he's probably a fourth or fifth deep on that list. Top 5 quarterbacks coming out of college in the 2012 season. Coming into the 2012 draft, Kirk Cousins was on that list for me. I'm not evaluating quarterbacks anymore from the college ranks. There's a couple really, really good ones, but do we have somebody that we can see cultivated at a Kirk Cousins level right now in the next 3 to 4 years? Possibly. I don't know. I mean, quite possibly. All I know is the Dallas Cowboys had their eye on Dak Prescott for a while, and they got a really good deal out of him, picking him what was 113th out of the draft overall. So they got him in a later round. Seattle did it with Russell Wilson. 3rd round, 4th round draft selection. There's plenty of these guys that come later in the draft that are able to become great football players. Great football players that can get you to the promised land and get you to the playoffs at least. So that's definitely something the football franchise, I think, is banking on, is that we can get somebody of equal caliber talent as Kirk Cousins only for a much cheaper price tag. And if that's possible, let's go do it. All I know is that we don't have the history of doing this. I can't remember. I cannot think since this owner has taken over this team. I cannot think of a quarterback ever since Dan Snyder's taken control of this football team where we have cultivated the talent of a Kirk Cousins from the draft. I don't think it's happened. I can't think of one. We had a flash of it in 2012, but that was it. I can't think of another quarterback that we drafted, at the middle round of the draft and was able to cultivate him to being, a franchise statistician, record breaker. We haven't had that. We're staring at one in the face right now, and this is the corner that we have backed ourselves into. Now, before I say anything else, the one thing I think that is very, very important to embark on everybody is that I like Kirk. I like Kirk a lot. I would love to see Kirk Cousins stay here in Washington and be our quarterback. But there's several reasons as to why I would not want him here. But I like Kirk as an individual. I feel I believe in his concepts. I believe in his way that he approaches the game. He's smart with his mouth. He does not say stupid stuff. He doesn't fumble the ball a whole lot. He doesn't take risks. He's a pocket passer. He's proven that he can play not only pistol, shotgun, but also play in the pocket. He's got a lot of talents that a lot of people don't want to necessarily look at. And Kirk obviously wants to play somewhere where he's wanted. In DC, I feel that the lack of love and support, I think, honestly, has been revealed. The only way that he's going to get that love and support out of this franchise is through financial compensation. That's really the only way. I think things have kind of soured so much here for him that right now, the only way that he's going to want to be able to play here is if this team is able to prove it. And the only way they're going to be able to prove it is by paying him. He has not said it, but let's face it, that's basically what he's saying. Look, I'd love to play here, but if you guys want me, pay me. I'm not going to give you guys any discounts. No franchise discounts for you. You guys have treated me like crap the last couple of years, and we have. We honestly have. I mean, when we sat down at the negotiating table in 2016, Kirk Cousins and his agent, his handler, Mike McCartney, very, very good agent, sat down and we were talking about dollar figures at that point. And I do believe the offer that was on the table from Mike McCartney, they were looking at a Brock Osweiler contract. They were looking at anywhere from 17 to 20 million. They were willing to go as low as 18 from what I understand. $18 million. But we came back with 12. We came back with $12 million is what we think Kirk Cousins is worth. That's beyond lowball. That is what we evaluated his talent to be. That was what we were willing to pay him. And that, obviously, the negotiations broke down. They did not talk since. I do believe that Kirk was a little upset. I do know that the agent was upset. And I believe we were kind of staying hard and fast, and we were looking at that football franchise, that franchise tag. Looking at putting him on the franchise tag and saying, hey, we want you to be able to prove to us. We want you to be able to meet us in the middle here. Prove to us that you can play at this level. Slap the franchise tag on him. Unfortunately, the franchise tag is not hovering at $19 million. It's not hovering at $18 million. It wasn't even hovering at $20. We paid him $24 million, I believe, $22 million. Much, much more than what we were initially being offered by his agent. Now, since the negotiations and both sides ended up feeling frustrated, we ended up franchise tagging him for the 2016 season, but that franchise tag, in my opinion, also had major consequences. Major consequences. Major upside for Kirk and the franchise. Prove it deal. Prove us that you can do this. This is going to give Kirk one more year to be able to prove that he can compete at this level, and he did that. He did that and then some. He blew that out of the water. Now, the ramifications. And some of the ramifications I'm going to list. One is it allows Kirk to prove that he can play at a league average, which he can. We gambled that he wouldn't be able to do it with a $12 million offer. That was one of the major drawbacks for us. Also, the other teams around the league begin to smell blood in the water. The other teams in the league know that he's on a franchise tag and he's on a prove it deal. They are going to pay very, very close attention, and they did pay very close attention to the performance of a Kirk Cousins, because the performance of a Kirk Cousins out there is making a lot of these guys' mouths water. They cannot wait to get a guy like this behind center for their football franchise, because a lot of them believe that Kirk Cousins is really the only piece that they need left to get to the playoffs or to get onto a Super Bowl. You've even got some other coaches out there who have new jobs that are looking at this individual with a franchise tag on his head. So there's blood in the water in Washington as far as that's concerned. Also, the third and last one I'll bring up. If Kirk does well and is able to prove that he can play at the league average that is allowed by him and his agent, then obviously, which he has done this year, then the high watermark for negotiation gets set for a whopping $24 million. That's the part that is extremely frustrating, is a lot of us that believed in Kirk Cousins, a lot of us that wanted to see this franchise do really, really well, know that we would have set this mark. We obviously would have signed this football player to a long-term deal before the 2016 season even started. This is how we got to where it is that we are today. This is why Kirk is not very well liked. One of the reasons why he's not very well liked amongst the football franchise is that it's going to be that cap hit that he's going to end up costing us. They don't feel that he's necessarily worth it, and they realize they could have had this quarterback at a $19 million deal, a front-loaded $5 million deal that honestly, if things wouldn't have worked out, we would be negotiating his contract and negotiating his exodus after this season. If we would have just been smart about this, this is something that would have definitely played it to our advantage. However, we've backed ourselves, painted ourselves into a corner, and now we're in a debacle here as far as obviously a franchise caliber quarterback who's going to be able to come in and prove themselves and having to pay through the nose. This is at the very heart of one of the reasons why I would not take a Kirk Cousins and sign him to his long-term deal. And honestly, Kirk's patience and his faith in his own ability has paid not only out on the football field, but it has also paid on the negotiating table. He's played his cards very, very well, despite the fact that he may not necessarily know where he's going to be playing in the next 2 years. Taking a look at some of the stats on Cousins, the stats, of course, on him. Taking a look, Kurt was obviously named to the NFC. He was named NFC Player of the Month for the month of November. That's the month of November. That's actually very, very good. November, December, if you can do that, you're doing very, very well. That's where I want you to be, NFC's Offensive Player of the Month, not necessarily the month of September. I don't care about the beginning of the season. I want to see what your longevity is like at the end. And he did it in the month of November. He completed 72.4% of his passes. He threw for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns and no interceptions for 124.4 passer rating in the month of November. 2012, he was a 4th-round draft selection, is one of the NFL's top 10 in several traditional statistical categories for quarterbacks. He is 3rd in passing yards with 4,000, 5th in completion rating for 67.5, 6th in passer rating with 100, and he's tied for 9th in touchdown passes for 23, and is 2nd in yards per pass attempt. He's on pace for shattering the Redskins' single-season franchise record for 4,000 passing yards that was set in 2015. He's also flirting with becoming the 6th player to have 5,000 yards passing, which has only been done by Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, and Matthew Stafford. He has obviously statistically put himself in the category of those individuals, which is phenomenal. That's phenomenal. That's really, really impressive to see. Taking a look at that, we are going to move on into a part 2. I'm going to split this off right now. I'm going to move into a part 2 for my reasonings for Kirk Cousins and not necessarily keeping him. I don't want this one video to necessarily be too long, so I'll catch you guys on the flip side of part 2.